Welcome back, friendos. Today I'm going to be the 80th YouTuber to warn you that Quinfall is most likely an MMO you want to avoid. But hopefully, aside from my opinion, I'm going to also be able to provide you with some new information and things to consider. So first up, what is Quinfall? Well, it's claiming to be the world's largest MMO, though no one has played it yet, so what it really is remains to be seen. As for what people are claiming Quinfall is, well, let's examine that before we move on to some additional context. Most of the original reporting on this topic stems from a YouTuber called Nuion. He did a great job putting together just how much of Quinfall is made up of store-bought assets, which most people treat as a giant red flag. I think I've got a little bit of a different opinion on this as a concept, but I will present the majority opinion on it first, and then why and where my opinion diverges. That will be a long tangent, so bear with me, and I will link on screen a timestamp if you want to skip this part, as well as in the description. So why are assets a red flag? For some people, the use of any store-bought assets is simply seen as bad, no matter the context. I think this is a silly opinion, but luckily a minority of people feel this way. I do see it pop up in online discussion, but I think most people are kind of in this second group, which is people holding an opinion that if a game has majority assets, the game now qualifies as an asset flip, devoid of any possibility of being good and labelled as such. I might be wrong here, of course. I'm fully accepting that maybe that's just my perception, but whenever I see people discuss a game being made entirely of assets, they almost always say that is an asset flip. The majority of the time, they're also right. It's going to be low quality, just garbage shoveled onto, Steam or wherever else to try and make a profit on almost no work. So as a rule of thumb, it's the safest bet to assume that's the case. Now let's examine why this is. So logically, if you can't see handcrafted art and assets created specifically for that game by that team, the easy and often correct assumption is that the game can't be high quality. Not only that, but if all you see in a gameplay trailer are things created by somebody else for everybody for a low barrier of like $50 or whatever, you've immediately put yourself in a position where you need to trust the developer that there's more work there which is invisible to your eyes, things that they've done, not just stitching together asset packs, because if not, obviously you're just going to see an asset flip. And realistically, no one should inherently trust random people that have every incentive to misrepresent and lie to you for obvious reasons. After all, if the developer doesn't have a track record or work history delivering even a bare minimum product, then why would they suddenly be trustworthy as a stranger that have built something even bigger and better with all the hard parts under the hood created that you can't see within a trailer? You shouldn't, and most people don't. That's the issue with assets. They make it almost impossible to see anything that's been done that isn't just buying and stitching things together. You have to actually play the game. So a lot of people are going to say that if you only have assets, that's a problem, which I see as a majority represented opinion in the games industry. Now, obviously, my opinion is that assets are there to be used. It doesn't matter if you use 1, 10, or all of them within your game. There are a ton of examples of people that have used exclusively 100% assets in their game, and the game's been mad successful and really good. Take Phasmophobia as a recent smash hit example. Now, obviously, I'm not saying any of this to defend Quinfall. I'm just saying that the topic of assets coming up and everyone talking about it means I do want to, mention this. I think whenever you see a game that is using majority assets, you should probably raise an eyebrow and then examine critically, are there other things we can see that could be a problem? But I do see people immediately jumping on, oh, it has assets, so therefore we're going to treat it as an asset flip, which I think is going way too far in the other direction. Obviously, you shouldn't be mad trusting, because that's silly, but you also shouldn't think everything that uses assets is, this bad thing. As a rule of thumb, the more purchased assets that's in a game, the more likely it's going to be bad, which is a water is wet statement. So nobody should really have to be told this, because if you're in a position where you need to rely entirely on assets, you likely have little to no resources or finances, which means obviously the game's more likely to suck than if you had a full team and the money to pay for them. That's just common sense, but I think it's reductive to say that a game is lazy or what people refer to as an asset flip if the whole thing is purchased stuff. The term asset flip does get used as a pejorative when an asset flip relies solely on the game being low quality, low effort and bordering on a scam due to the work being done on the actual game, not solely because they use assets, even if it is all assets. So to sum this up, I know this is a mad, like, huge tangent nobody needed to talk about. It really, does bother me when I see people doing this, because I like indie games. Lots of indie games use assets, and they need to. And I don't think people should be saying, oh, use assets. It's definitely a scam or a really bad thing. TLDR, a good game is a good game, a bad game is a bad game, regardless of how many assets they use. But the more assets used make the likelihood of the game being bad increase drastically. Indie studios and single devs using assets shouldn't be demonized purely because some other people fucked around and did bad things, especially as we move forward, where the actual game development becomes easier, but art assets still remain a bottleneck, unless you want to advocate for AI, which is a whole other can of worms. So there we go, there's the timestamp. We've appeared in a different section of the video. You've activated my trap card as well. Go to the link in the video description, buy GamerSupps. They've got all kinds of cool products, like their main one, which you put in water and drink. Comes in all kinds of weird and wonderful flavours, like anime girl thigh and titty milk, or my personal favourite, soda pressed despair. You can buy caffeinated or caffeine free. You can buy waifu cups with lovely anime girls with fantastic personalities. You can buy snacks, teas, all kinds of shit, and you can do it with 10% off using my affiliate code. Now back to the dumpster fire. So I think one of the things that's good about having a skepticism about assets is that when people see games like Quinfall, they immediately raise an eyebrow and start thinking, is this smoke? And if so, is there any fire? And in Quinfall's case, yeah, there's a raging inferno. The assets are just the low-hanging fruit though. There's a much juicier fruit just one branch above. So from using stock images of offices with their logo photoshopped in it to make them seem bigger than they are, to removing that evidence as soon as they got caught, from talking about a beta release coming to now saying that you need to pay to get into the beta, from a previously developed game partnering with a real money trade marketplace to, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Quinfall is developed by someone who I wouldn't personally call a scammer because I can't know that he's being malevolent, but he's developed by someone who has a long history of being delusional, combative, and is in business with a company that makes every single other point we're going to discuss in this video entirely irrelevant. So who's Quinfall being created by, and why should we care? Why does this matter? It's a guy whose real name I can't pronounce because he's Turkish and I have no idea what sound these letters make, so I'm going to avoid embarrassing myself by trying. He's better known in the Turkish video game community, or specifically the Turkish MMO community, as Frenzy. Now, some context you need to know about the Turkish MMO community because this is a niche area of knowledge that is important. Turkish people love MMOs, and the first MMO created that started this love was called IKV. Students of the genre will know that after that came Night Online, which for whatever reason is just incredibly popular in Turkey. I don't know why, but when I used to play Night, just all Turkish people. Still to this day, Turkish people love Night Online. Now obviously with IKV being one of the first MMOs, it was the subject of much discussion in later years and attempted recreations. One such person who tried to cash in on this and recreate the game is none other than our boy Frenzy. He posted all over the IKV forum, discussion boards and whatever else saying that his new game, Kayra Online, was going to revive IKV, putting the spirit of that beloved old game into this new one. Who is he? How could he suddenly create an MMO? Well, according to information relayed to me by someone that has intimate experience with Frenzy, he could not. As a disclaimer from this point on in the video, we're going to be moving on with information that has been relayed to me by someone familiar with the situation. These are allegations and personal anecdotes, though some can be backed up by video evidence and social media posts that are sadly in Turkish. So Frenzy was lost in his own source, as many developers find themselves. He used the term legendary game developer as his forum signature, throwback to when forums existed by the way. When pressed on how many games he'd created, he said 1,000 in the last 10 years. Being that at this time he was 27 years of age, that would mean from 17 he'd created an average of one video game every 3 days. Quite a feat. This man has created more video games than you've had hot dinners. So if he's created that many games, he must be a genius, right? So how did Kayra Online turn out? Well, as other people have covered in videos, not very good. What those videos have discussed thus far is that the game was in beta and it had a terribly predatory cash shop selling insane boosts and partnering with a real money trading website. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, it's actually much worse than that. Kayra Online was allegedly almost entirely client authoritative. What this means is most games, especially MMOs, will be server authoritative. An MMO that relies on clients to decide what's real is obviously going to be subject to a whole host of issues, including very easy dupes and cheat and things of that nature. You wouldn't even need third-party tools for this, the game would just be completely fucked. This would extend to almost every aspect of the game, add in that there's potentially thousands of users on the server, and it would mean no one was seeing or experiencing really the same game state. So when the issues of Kayra Online being networked in this way was raised to Frenzy, his response was apparently that he didn't believe people would find out or exploit this if they did. Which is kind of like saying, I'm not going to lock the bank vault, because I don't think anyone in the world would steal from it, even if they're going to gain. Especially when the game is literally partnered with a real money trading website, meaning duping and having advantages would translate into tangible real-world financial gains. On top of this, during Kayra's online beta, it was announced that during an update to the game system, people's email addresses and passwords are now case-sensitive. You can probably hear my cats fighting in the background, don't worry, they're just playing, they're just kittens. So with them now updating that, we've changed how the system works and it's now case-sensitive, according to what I've been told, means that they were storing their user details in a database as plain text, as opposed to salted and hashed, which, hopefully I don't have to tell you, is a massive security red flag and a display of sheer incompetence if true. Anyone doing this and making this rookie error is probably not going to be making the next gen revolutionary largest MMO. On top of all this, when people start to figure out Kayra Online was a broken mess that allowed people to dupe items by simply changing the quantity they had in their backpack, and the server would say, yeah, you're right, you do have all those items, Frenzy and the Kayra team, allegedly, started to copyright strike creators in the Turkish community who was calling them out, going so far in some cases as to ban them from the game for speaking out. Now that was a couple years ago, so if you bear in mind that Frenzy was the one handling that game and it was a complete piece of shit, what are the chances in a couple of years time he's been able to learn a bunch of stuff and develop this game at the same time? Probably slim to none, and of course the problems don't end there. The last thing I'll say, the major issue, even if we ignore all the red flags, the history of development competence, the assets and everything else, there is still the matter that disqualifies this developer of being trustworthy or this game of being something anyone should ever recommend. Their history and business partnerships with real money trading, as well as how they view real money trading. When a game is partnered with, actively promotes and financially benefits from real money trading, this creates a massive conflict of interest. After all, for the average player, what they value most is integrity of competition, or at the very least an illusion of integrity. People want to know that they have a chance to compete with others, even if common sense dictates most people never do, since they're unlikely to spend the same amount of time on the game. When a company has a very direct and upfront link to real money trading, there's absolutely no chance for even an illusion of fairness or competitive integrity to exist to fool yourself with. The conflict of interest here is that promoting an RT website that you benefit from financially means you're incentivized to generate and backchannel deal your own currency and rare items to sell on said marketplace, to unfairly ban users if they are competition for sales, and any other number of scenarios you can think of. Now, am I saying that they did this or would do it if the same business arrangement existed in Quinfall? No. What I'm saying is that it opens the door to make it absolutely impossible to trust the developer. That the thought even entering your brain should disqualify the game, because you're never going to know whether they're doing it or not, because they have that history. Even if in Quinfall they didn't outright promote or partner with the same business or a similar one, the connection's there and it's impossible to ignore. This one arrangement just makes me say, I'm never going to really play this game. Maybe I'll test it out for coverage when it launches to see what became of Quinfall, but I'm never going to be able to consider putting time or money into something like this. I know there's a cultural difference here, and that RMT is rampant in Turkish MMOs, but it just doesn't fit into the model of how I see the genre. Even when I know that stuff exists behind the scenes in games that I play, at least I don't have it in my head that maybe the company that's running the game is actually actively participating in it and ruining their game. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say on the matter until more stuff becomes available, which usually does with topics like this. As soon as people start making videos, it's just a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum until finally it all ends. So to conclude, am I saying that Quinfall is a scam, or that the people behind it are scammers? No, surprisingly I'm not. I'm saying that it's shady as fuck, and the developer seems to be one of those Dunning-Kruger developers with complete delusions about his abilities, as well as a bad faith actor with how he's dealt with criticism in the past, as well as a massive conflict of interest that disqualifies him and the company and everyone involved of any good faith or trust at all. But you guys, as always, can make up your own mind. You've been warned, do not buy this game. If it comes out and it's great as a gameplay experience, then obviously cool, that's great. But I will say I'd still avoid it based on the developer's history, and what they could be doing on the back end. But yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess. See you next time.